Welcome to the Landscapes and Pancakes podcast, where we explore all of the wonderful opportunities that the green industry offers. I'm Neil Best, joined as always to help me navigate this green journey is the intrepid Samantha Best.
Oh, Neil, it is so wonderful to see you today.
Thank you, Samantha. How are you and how have you survived 2020?
Oh, it has not been easy, let me tell you.
Has it not?
I cannot believe that we started this podcast in the middle of a pandemic.
Oh, what were we thinking?
Such crazy kids.
That we are.
I can't do it anymore. I'm sorry.
What are you guys doing?
The Landscapes and Pancakes podcast.
Wow. There are a gajillion aspects to the green industry.
All right.
I just want this podcast to be real.
Interesting. It's not always fun.
What?
But I think people go through this.
I know, none of it makes sense.
Seriously?
We are the ones designing and we are the ones building.
We respect each other.
Respect. Well, babe, thanks for appeasing me. I had to try it.
You know I really didn't want to do that.
I know, but it was fun. That was my best NPR voice.
It was pretty good.
Yours is pretty good too.
Hey, maybe we have new careers ahead of us.
I wouldn't think so.
Well, listen, I have to say, I'm pretty sure we are crazy on many levels.
Yeah.
Many
I think
levels.
today affirms that.
Yes. So we are headed out the door for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We will be working remotely from the beautiful state of Arkansas.
Yeah.
May as well tell the people.
Woo!
We kind of have done something that was kind of a little bit of a dream, and we just kind of made it happen. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I think it was a dream that started, I don't know, whenever we got together, say 15 or so years ago. We just didn't know where that dream was going to take place. And
Yeah.
now we do,
Yeah.
at least this stage of it.
With 2 kids, a van, and a trailer that we're going to tow behind us. So we just spent...
And a dog.
And a dog and a hamster.
And a hamster.
Yes.
So yes,
we
we're
just
crazy.
spent the last 2 days packing up, getting ready to go. And we were like, we got to get this podcast out the door.
Yes.
So here we are recording our intro at about 5 o'clock.
And I still have to pack all my clothes.
Right.
But I will say, so when we started this right before Corona, right? So we didn't see that coming. And the goal was to do, full disclosure, 2 episodes a month. So
you actually made me promise that would happen.
I know. And I know, to my credit, as I get older, I'm starting to realize what we can and can't do, what we shouldn't do. But we banged out 12 episodes.
Right. This is lucky 13.
Right. So let's make it a goal to do 12 this year.
Yes.
Until...
Or maybe more, but
you know
maybe
what?
not.
Some awesome sponsor wants to pay us to do it more often. How about we talk about it then? And until then, 12's the goal.
But Neil, you're forgetting we actually do have 3 new sponsors.
Oh, that's right.
It's so exciting.
All right, let's
So
read
go
them off.
ahead, go.
Let's do it.
All right.
This episode of the Landscapes and Pancakes podcast is brought to you by the Autoscape app. Simply upload pictures of your property and have your dream landscape design in minutes. Because grading and drainage really aren't that important. The Autoscape app.
I like how you say important.
I'm trying to emphasize. So I'm trying to prove
How important?
that we can do ad reads.
Oh, okay. Well, let me hear another one because the important
This is a good one. You ready?
Okay, let's see. Who's next?
Volcano mulch. When mulch matters more than the plant. Find out more at plantreallyaren'tthatimportantanyway.com.
Can you stop saying important, please?
I never realized I said. Do I normally say it that
No,
way?
you don't. You are emphasizing every single letter.
This is important to get the enunciation.
Okay, who's next? Oh boy, we're never gonna get a sponsor. Who's next?
Oh, they're just going to be lining out the door, man. I'm telling you. You ready? And finally, thank you to Inside Out Audio. Now offering 20% off the latest Garden Max outdoor TV. The latest 450-inch hurricane-proof screen now comes equipped with a state-of-the-art Roman Coliseum audio package. Mention the code Landscapes and Pancakes at checkout for your discount. Inside Out Audio. Because really, who wants to just sit in nature?
So how big was that screen?
450 inches,
How
baby.
many feet is that?
I don't
Can you
know.
do the
Because they
math?
do it on a diagonal, right? I don't know
Oh,
TVs.
yeah. They do it on
But
a
that's
diagonal.
a hell of a big TV.
That's damn big TV.
That's what we need. Because the thing is, right? If you don't have that size TV,
What's the
with
point?
with the Roman Coliseum audio package, you're gonna hear the birds and all the water.
The
it's gonna-
crickets.
yeah,
You
it's
don't want to hear that
no,
crap.
Come on, what are we doing there?
All right. Well, there is a little fun for you for
So,
episode 13.
You people out there too can have an ad read on the Landscapes and Pancakes podcast. So let's go.
Yeah.
2021's our year, baby.
Just throw it at us.
Mm-hmm. All right, buddy. Let's get serious. Get down to business. Let's go. Guest time. Come on.
Okay. So for lucky episode number 13, we have John Shaw-Rimmington on today.
Oh, I'm ecstatic. Ecstatic. When he said yes, it was just one of those guests that I was like, yes, because he's, in my mind, he's a living legend in the stone world.
Yeah, so John works out of Canada, and he's the founder and president of Dry Stone Walling across Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really fun to talk to, so let's get him on. We are so excited today to have John Shaw-Rimmington with us. John is a waller, sculptor, president and founder of the Dry Stone Walling across Canada. Did I get it right? Did I say it?
Pretty close. Pretty close.
Did I leave something out?
I think the bio went on to say exploring arty things in stone. I don't know whether maybe that's not
I like
love
arty
it.
things.
I love it.
Yeah.
I
Dig
love
it.
So John, I have to tell you, our youngest son has started doing gymnastics recently. And I have to say, he has nothing over you when it comes to forward somersaults.
Well, I had a hill in my favor. The momentum started. I couldn't stop.
But your form was immaculate. Your chin was tucked, your body was tight, and you made it all the way down that hill.
I didn't realize it was as good as that, but I appreciate the comment. Thank you.
I was highly impressed.
So for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, John posted this very fun video of him basically doing forward somersaults down a hill until he kind of got to the end and then just kind of unraveled.
Exploded at the end. I think I got dizzier. I was prepared to feel dizzy, but I was not prepared to feel that dizzy.
I'll say the most impressive thing is for a waller, having worked stone for as many years as you have, to be able to keep that form and stay that limber, man. That's good stuff.
Well, that's the first thing that you can kind of say is a plus about what we do as wallers, is that we do have a variety of body motions. It's not just like if you were a painter or a plumber or a mechanic. We get to do enough that we can almost justify it as as all we need for exercise. It's not quite true, but it's close enough.
Right. That's actually funny you say that, because we had a conversation with our last guest. We actually spoke with a yoga instructor. We're very much involved with yoga. And we were kind of talking about the fact that, some people, and we used to think too, that the physicalness of what we did for work was enough for exercise. And I think we've kind of come to realize it might be exercise, but it might not be, quote, healthy exercise. In a way, or reach the right all the right poles that need to be exercised. I guess I'm very bad at certain stretches, and I don't think anything I do in stone helps me stretch that way. So I've got to do it some different. Right.
And maybe rolling down a hill is a good stretch.
That's a really good start. That's what I would say.
Yeah. I was going to say, you've got that nailed for sure. All right. So let's get down to some nitty gritty details. So first of all, where in Canada are you?
Pretty close to Toronto. Most people know where Toronto is. If you swam from Rochester across Lake Ontario, you would hit Port Hope,
Okay.
which is about an hour east of Toronto.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we do. I mean, my geography sucks, but I do know where Toronto is, so I can visualize that.
Look at Chicago and go north.
I feel like John is holding his tongue right now. You Americans
No, no,
and your
no.
geography.
I will talk perhaps later in the conversation, but no need
No.
to.
We've only been to the easternmost portion of Canada, which was lovely.
Yeah, we took a
Absolutely
trip
lovely.
up to Nova Scotia 2 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Cape Breton Island.
Yeah, that's really a lovely area. We were in Quebec, which is not Nova Scotia at all, but those provinces seem connected to the New England states in more ways than I had thought. I found recently dry stone walls in Quebec that were part of the craze of building walls in New England had sort of swept up to what was maybe not even Canada then, but we're much more connected than you think via dry stone walling, at least the eastern part of North America.
Right. Well, now that you say that too, I think I remember. Don't you remember in Nova Scotia we were reading about there were places during the Revolutionary War that troops were kind of moving back and forth too. So there is definitely a rich history between Nova Scotia and New England for sure.
And if you have an army of people and they're waiting to either attack or be attacked, it feels like a kind of thing you might get them to do. You might say, well, what are we going to, we've got to feed them all day or part of the day. And we've done drills. Let's get them to build some walls. And I think a lot of walls got built that way. Make walls, not war.
Right.
we can all just live under that.
Wouldn't life be grand? So, John, can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of got started in this world of stonework? Can we get kind of your backstory?
I'll try and keep it short. I tell a story when I'm teaching because I think it's kind of fundamental to the attitude one should take as they get closer to stone and handling it. I fell into a good position where I was a mason's helper. I had an aptitude for it. I was supposed to be hired to just mix the cement, and they'd hired two people. The other guy, Peter, was relegated to making cement, mixing it in the mixer, and I got to fairly quickly start shaping stone. It was granite, it was glacial granite, and we were building a foundation for a log house. We worked for a man who built log houses and a contractor, and of course he had people who would work on the wood. We were doing the stonework, and I found I had a kind of aptitude for it. At least the fellow I was working with said, "Yeah, you got some skill there, a little bit, or potential." And so that went on so that I got to fairly quickly learn and be taught the basics of stone masonry, which went on for many years. What we did, or what I trained to do, was fix or repair or restore stone buildings, stone foundations, build traditional fireplaces and chimneys, and do stonework. We studied what was then very structural stonework and tried to reproduce it in, say, putting an addition on a house or something like that. And it was a lot of fun, even through the difficult times of the 80s when people weren't so quick to part with their money and have real stonework done. They would want veneers, and this is when I kind of tried to enjoy what we were doing, where we were doing impersonations of thicker stonework, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
We were taking stones that should have been laid flat, and they actually were put upright because there was no room because it was a veneer. But we did it as if people looking at would think it was a shiner, like it was a thick, half a round stone, 14 inches thick. And we tried to create the same rhythm and patterns of stonework that you would see that was structural. But that finally, the stones started speaking to me and said, we're not just decoration. We're not just here to ornament the side of a building. and it was a very serious speaking to me. And I realized that even though I could sort of fake it and make stone look structural, I I was missing actually making it
Making it
structural.
structural. Yeah, that's interesting.
Just decorate. And there was this moment when I realized I needed to do something real, not something that looked real, and there's a big difference.
Yeah.
And so, making long story short, I discovered that one of the only things you can do without going through a mess of permits, and even then you might not be able to ever build a structural house that I know of just out of stone. I think they don't trust it enough, or they don't trust the people laying stone enough to actually let you build a structural house. You have to use iron or steel beams, wood, and those things. So the only thing that I found that I could actually build, and it was the real thing, was a dry stone wall. And that's what I did. I started building walls enough that people driving by sort of were curious and asked about it. And I had to admit that I'd only been building based on my structural knowledge of heritage stonemasonry and restoring buildings that were structural. So I thought, well, I better go to England and find out if I'm doing it right, if I've got brothers and sisters there who are similar sort of masons who are turning away from using mortar as a glue, and met up with the people in Britain who ran the Dry Stone Walling Association of Great Britain, and met up with some fine people and learned the trade more, worked with them, invited them over to Canada, and we started an association called Dry Stone Walling Association of Canada. And I began building more and more, and also connecting via internet with people of like mind in Canada. And we started basically a not-for-profit association, except there was some profit in it,
Well,
but
there
it
should
was,
be.
has
There
to
should
be.
be.
There has
There
to
should
be.
be.
yeah, well,
I want to
that
get.
was the fun.
I do, John. I do want to talk. I want to get back to the association. There's a lot that I think we're fascinated, but I want to just backtrack just a little bit. I wanted to just get a better understanding. When you started your career, were you just out of high school? Were you?
Oh,
How?
no. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
How did you come to even recognize this trade? So one of the things that we're trying to do with this podcast in general, and I think it's kind of akin to what you're doing with your organization, is we're trying to make people understand that this is an industry that has so much to offer. So broadly speaking, we say the green industry. So whether it has to do with walling, whether it has to do with being a landscape designer or architect or a horticulturalist, we're trying to show people that there's all these different avenues that you can choose within this absolutely amazing industry. So I love to know, how did you even know that this is something you might want to do?
Well, I go back to the fact that the stones were speaking to me, and not audibly, but to the degree that they were saying, you know, you I was enjoying working with stone and doing restoration work, but they said, veneer work and doing stuff that is ornamental with stone, at least for my personality anyway, was not the way to go. And I began experimenting just on my own, building with stone structurally based on what I had learned as a stonemason. And of course, I could shape stone, but part of the flavor, part of the joy, part of the excitement about working in dry stone was that I no longer approached, I had the option of putting my tools down and saying, instead of saying, I can fix this stone, it was, I know where this stone can go in a wall. It's already made for me. The philosophy of it really touched me deep inside, because most of what we need, ironically, is always so close to us. Whether it's, you dig a well, or you find trees to build a house, or you find in the dirt enough to grow things in. I discovered that as the stones are waiting to be put together.
That's interesting because it's almost I associate. There's a fascination here in New England with fieldstone and stone walls and our historic walls, is because
Sure.
stone here is such a tremendous resource. So I wonder for you if stone's plentiful where you're from, and that really growing up in that environment, if the stone spoke to you sooner in your life than you realized. I kind of have that philosophical feeling myself.
Yes.
Because we have a tremendous, I mean, we have schist stones that we can do flagging with here within 2-hour shot of our house. And we have a tremendous
Yeah, isn't that great?
granite quarries here. And we have all sorts of reclaimed
Mhm.
stones now, which is so fun to dive into
Mhm.
that world. And then our field stones, New England is just like a treasure trove.
Of
Of,
glacials. Yeah.
yeah, so I wonder if you kind of have that same experience where you're from.
It's pretty much, we've got here in Southern Ontario and up into the north is enough stone of different varieties, farmers' fields covered with limestone and granite glacial till and various types of field stone that are workable for what we do, build dry stone. A lot of people are kind of dubious about the round stones, but we have no problem with them. We actually enjoy working with the round ones.
Well, I'm
But
fascinated by those walls. They're beautiful. And I wonder if what your philosophy is on those round stones. It doesn't look like you're dressing them in any sort of
oh,
way
you
on the
can.
face.
You shouldn't.
Right.
They're so hard, and they're never perfectly round, but they've got some length to them, and you really have to work with the length to make sure that's put inside the wall rather than along the wall.
Mm.
And there's a tendency to want to course with them because it looks so good. If you can find stones of equal mass and size, you can you can work courses where it suddenly looks like a box of chocolates, and you go, wow, this is. My thought is that, again, that the stones, this is what they want to do. That we're just facilitators. We're sort of it's a privilege for us to be put in a position where we can accommodate what the stones want.
Mm. And with that, there seems as though there needs to be a tremendous amount of restraint on the waller's part to not put that stone the long way, no matter how perfect it may sit. So I wonder about that, what
You
that
hit a
process
great
is like.
word. The word restraint. I use it a lot in describing what the process is of building a wall. It's restraint on every level. It's you restrain from using all your best stones first
Yes.
and only have crap afterwards, or what you think is crap. You restrain from doing something that looks pretty on the outside to the expense of what's going on the inside. You restrain from putting a mossy stone outside, even though you kind of wish you could show the moss, structurally that it's better to turn the stone and using it differently. And there's a sense that there's a learning process that we that wallers have. We've been given the advantage of thinking about restraint, which is what we need on this planet. It's all about ecology. It's all about don't just use what's there without thinking about what's coming along. Restrain. Don't. I'm not getting it across perhaps as clearly as I'd like, but it is one of the fundamental things as a waller we have to do. We cannot just hit a stone and try and fix it. We have to restrain and think, oh, maybe it's okay the way it is. Maybe it's a problem solver. But we look at many things like problems, but maybe they're problem solvers.
Yeah, there's perfection in that imperfection, right?
Yeah, very much so.
But I do love what you said about the mossy stones, because I mean,
know.
how many
But
times have
hard.
have we looked at a stone and I'm like, Neil, you gotta use this stone.
You need
Look
that-
at the
I know.
moss. And he's
You need that discipline, though. It's tough.
moss.
It's
Oh,
tough.
lichen. Oh, we love that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
And I still have trouble, and but essentially when I'm dealing with a client and the client says, oh, can you use this orange stone? I'd like to see this orange stone in the wall. and I have to say, it may go in the wall. I'll say that. But first of all, you're not the boss, I say to the client. And I say, and second of all, I'm not the boss. It's the stones that are really going to have the final say in how they look, because you're concentrating on structure first. And if you do that, the beauty does come. But if you're concentrating on it being beautiful, or you're meddling too much and trying to make it beautiful, it will not look beautiful, and it will not be structural.
And Neil, I think you can relate to that early on. I feel like we've had a lot of conversations with you feeling, or maybe over analyzing what you were doing too much. And then it seems like the days you would come and say, I just did it. I just worked and I just got it done. And then you're never sure of how it looks. And then I would come to the job and be like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah, I go through this process, John, for me, and this is with everything that we do, flat work, walls. I'm never completely sold on it while I'm in the moment. I have to leave the job for a while and come back, oftentimes to appreciate it or look past something. And then I say to myself, how ridiculous were you? Why you put yourself through that hell? That's odd.
No, it shouldn't be hell, though. No, that doesn't sound right.
Neil's a tortured soul. Neil is a tortured soul.
That's why I do yoga.
I do advocate to my students that they build a little, and then they have to get up and walk away from the wall and turn around and look at it. And in that moment, most of your inner knowledge, your consciousnness about aesthetics and balance and anything to do with stone sort of click in, and I think you see it and you go, oh, well, that doesn't look very good. Or, oh, well, that part kind of works. Or, oh, look, that stone looks crooked. And it's the standing back from it and the fact that it's dry laid and not mortar allows you to go back and fix it.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, that is a good point. John, I was curious, though. I wanted to kind of go back and see if we could talk a little bit about your time in England and what you learned from those people there, and stylistically, maybe what you were seeing there that you didn't see here. Or just talk about your experience going to another country and learning a skill in another place.
Well, okay, if you want, I will.
Do.
I was born in England, which is I think a big factor in all of this. I was born in England. My parents moved when I was 4. I managed to find them.
You caught up with them, right?
It's an old Woody Allen joke. They moved to Montreal and then Winnipeg, and then I grew up a little bit in Detroit. And then my parents moved to Toronto, and I became filthy rich through I was commercial.
What a life.
The stories took a turn.
I was in a commercial and made some money, at which point my parents thought I was unbearable because I was a teenager and I had money. So they said, why don't you go off to England where you were born and look around and see some of your relatives and friends and things.
Get some humility.
And I did. And I fell in love with the country that I had basically forgotten as a 4-year-old, but it was in my blood, and the castles and the sheep and the ruins and the walls, and the cathedrals, it was blowing me away.
The history.
I remember seeing Stonehenge, and all I could do was and you could go up to it then, and all I could do, because I had nothing with me. There was not a camera or anything. And I just hugged one of these dolmens, or I forget what they're called, the uprights. And I attribute a lot to that. I think I soaked in something on that trip.
Some energy.
And went back, as I said, the next time I went back, well, I did go back 2 times prior to that. But going back and arranging to work with dry stone wallers in their country, which I now was hooked on dry stone walling as my profession, was pretty insightful. I realized that there's a bit of a stigma about walls in England because of the circumstance of the Closures Act and and the fact that people probably build walls because they had to, more than just for farming's sake, but to actually prove that the land was theirs, and there was this, also the fact that they were kicked off the land once there was enough stone walls around that they didn't need as many people tending the sheep and things like that. So
Oh, wow.
I'm beginning to see that what we have here in North America and Canada is a very different look at stone walls. They're more glamorous here, particularly, and there's more potential for experimentation. In England and Scotland and parts of Ireland, walls are associated with not being particularly stylish or a potential for art, but just a thing that has fallen down and speaks of troubled times or unhappy times.
So are you saying that in England, whereas here stone is somewhat historically, once stone became associated with kind of an upper class,
It's a status symbol,
and it
to a
became more of a
degree.
status symbol. Are you saying in England, stone walls are more of a reminder of kind of this relationship between landowners and the peasants who worked the land?
Yeah, there's a lot of history there, and it's not all
Oh, that's
good history.
interesting. Yeah.
And I also think that's part of the reason it hasn't taken off in North America quite the same as I would have anticipated. That the people who came over were very, some of them were really probably quite violently opposed to dry stone walls. They probably
Huh.
made to build them, and then they were shipped off, and they came to Canada and they said, "There's no way I'm going to build with stone," you know.
Oh,
And there was a
wow.
lot of wood here, of
Right.
course, but I was at a Highland Games building a wall as a demonstration project, and a Scottish lady walked by and she was crying, and she said, I didn't realize how much I missed these dry stone walls.
Mm.
No.
She said dry stone dikes, and I thought about it, and I thought, yeah, art. At least I feel my job is to at least do gesture drawings of something that connects with people, and they maybe see a section of wall. Maybe it's only 10 feet long at the Highland Games or in a park even, and they remember their past. They remember the old country. I also like to think that I'm saving a lot of jet fuel by building things that look like a ruins and maybe are not, but saves you having to go to England to look at ruins.
Mm.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. We were talking earlier before you came on. We were curious if there were any historic walls or any conservation efforts in Canada to preserve walls, because there certainly is here. And again, because our history is so entwined with the stone walls that we see throughout New England. So you are technically not supposed to take down stone walls. When you find them in the woods, you're not supposed to take the stone.
Mhm.
You're supposed to leave them.
Yeah,
as you found them.
some areas are more protected than others. It's almost town wide here.
Yeah.
in a lot of
Town by
ways.
town.
Do you find that there are other conservation efforts to preserve anything that
It's
is
certainly needed, but I'm not aware of anything very well put together in terms of spelling it out, what can be taken down or what can be removed. If a farmer agrees to you having some stone off his property, I don't know of any restrictions on him for allowing that or not allowing that.
Yeah.
I think too here, I think the narrative going back 15, 20 years ago, a lot of us believed that all of our stone were these old stone walls that would be taken down and resold. We didn't really realize that we are still tilling stone, and that is in large part what we're buying when we're talking about our field stone here. Where we have a mishmash. So we're in Massachusetts, and when we're buying our stone, it's a mishmash of stone that's coming out of Connecticut, in New Hampshire, Maine, everything kind of strewn together, and depending on where you're picking from. So
we deal with a quarry that's local. We deal with farmers who have stones mostly in piles, not in walls at all. They would be hedgerows of them, but I very rarely feel like I'm doing anything that I shouldn't be doing, because we're using local stone, and I feel like it's like a catchphrase, local food. It's a return to using the materials that are most close to us.
Now, what do you think? That just kind of brings up in my mind the environmental aspect of using local stone, and I'm curious to hear from you what we'll talk about environmental footprints and what a dry stone wall using more native stone means versus we're seeing stone that's imported from all over the world.
Yeah, and I would get on my soapbox if you don't stop me.
Preach,
I'll
brother,
I'll let
preach.
you take one step up. How's that? No.
I think it's wrong. I think it's very wrong to bring stone from far away just because you can afford it, or just because you want to be unique, or for any number of reasons. I think it's I don't know what the word is. Is it a shame, or is it unnecessary? There's Again, we're blessed where we are. You have stone where you are, and we have stone where we are. But when I see someone importing stone from China, or worse, and here's the footprint part, crushing stone to make a material that looks like stone to build with, that to me is the.
I never thought of it that way. That's interesting.
It's nonsense. It's like it's trying to manufacture something that you don't have to bring the manufacturing part into. Now, a lot of people can argue with me, and I can go on a long time about it. I understand some of the arguments, but I still think the main emphasis that we have to take is to de-manufacture. We need to stop manufacturing things, and a dry stone is like a gift, because there's no middleman. There's no need to have an improved stone. There's no need to bring it from far away. The stones that are closest, if you're in an area where there are stone walls to be built, there will be stone there.
Mm.
And I think I would just say, as I think we've had this conversation amongst ourselves and with others, I think for the most part, we're very much on board with what you're saying. But we are design build. And so I will say the designer part of me always tries to look at what's locally available. But I'd be lying if I didn't say, if my job is not only to be environmentally conscientious, but also aesthetically and functionally conscientious for the client, then I think that there are times that I will look outside of what might be, within a 100-foot radius. I mean, we've used travertine, I will not use stone from China. I have put my foot down.
Adamant about it. And it gets pushed on her a lot by distributors.
A lot.
What about manufactured stone?
I'm sorry?
What about manufactured
stone? Like concrete pavers and that
like
sort
a
of
veneer. We've never used any type of veneer. I actually don't even really do natural stone veneer, to be honest with you. It's just something that I've never really done. Yeah. I try to stay away from it.
Yeah. And we don't do a lot of work with concrete products, but again, we're in sort of a different position in that we're working with all sorts of clientele, and there is definitely a price difference. So between natural stone and say a concrete product. So, it's like everything, there's a balance in everything, right? So my number one priority in what I do in this industry is to get people outside and to get them outside and connect to the environment around them. Yeah. So I have to sometimes sacrifice the ideal solution to be able to do that.
I think what we do is we estimate the ideal scenario, and that's we have our druthers 100% of the time, that's natural stone on a flat work level, and then we'll give them a brick option, a clay brick option, and or a paver option as a different price point. And as designers, I think when you're talking native stone, that's something I think we all could have a better understanding of and educate our clients as best as practical. Not only the cost, it can't just be the cost analysis, but it has to be the environmental analysis, because to some people, thankfully, that's a major consideration. So I think it's on us to explore that with
I
them.
just bring it up because I think it's a great philosophical conversation that we have within this industry, what our ideal solutions are and what are your number one priorities. And again, I just come back to this driving idea that my number one priority is to get people outside and connecting to nature. And if it takes a less than ideal solution to make that happen, then sometimes it has to be that way. Always, because maybe I can make up for it by a real heavy native planting. So I can, because that doesn't impact them financially as much. So I can still kind of bring in this different aspect that they may not have thought of, but I can still be within their budget. So I just like this conversation because I always feel like we talk a lot about ideals, I think, in the world and how we want to save everything. But there is a reality to everyone's situation. And so if you can pick and pull and figure out your battles and where you can kind of bring in that consciousness, then I feel like that's a win.
What say you, my friend? What say you?
No, it's a really interesting conversation. I have had the privilege of exposing people to something that's local that they didn't consider. And that's a privilege. I remember we built a bridge for a lady. Her property had a creek that went through it, and she was insistent she wanted a bridge, basically because we built a bridge for her brother and she wanted one too. And
I want one.
Can I get one?
and it's a long story, but the part I want to get to is I'm trying to remember now, is the what did I say that word was before? This is a moment.
Discipline, restraint. No?
Yeah, that was a word back then, but there was a word closer, more recent. Oh, you were talking, Samantha. Exposure. This lady did get we built her a bridge, and she said, I want to bring my landscaper here to see this. And her landscaper had been on holiday or something and hadn't been there for a year or so, because we had other walls on the property. And she came and she was a nice lady, and she looked at the dry stone walls and the bridge as if she had been giving a different color on her palette, that she had red, green, yellow, orange, but she didn't have purple. And she never even knew about purple. It was like, you can do this, we can do it. And it was a new part of our vocabulary. And so I think what I like doing, and I think what you guys can do, is expose people to what their options are. And some of those options I think are closer to them than they realize.
Yeah.
And so you bring them, you not only bring them out to nature, but then you show them what's there. There are rocks there. There are rocks all around, right?
Yeah, that's an amazing point, because I often think about the industry as a whole. And when it comes to wall building and patio building and walkways and these sorts of things, and this kind of dawned on me recently, there is a whole younger generation, John, that really does not understand that natural stone is an option. It's actually secondary, where because of how and where I grew up, fortunately, I understood natural stone and I understood, okay, bricks. I had never seen a concrete product in the ground my whole young life. So, some people just know what they have handed to them in a catalog. And then that is pushed to the end user, and the end user doesn't know that they have options either. So it's very interesting to know that when you think about it in that manner, it's just, it's kind of mind blowing. But I think that's more the norm. Really. Say again, sorry.
There's so many parts of this, and what do we call it? Material, this trade, this way of construction that is counterintuitive and yet so healthy, and for the environment, for our brains, for each. Wall building is a communal thing. There's usually not much manufactured materials to go with it. There doesn't have to be heavy machinery if you're using stones that two people could lift at the heaviest. And so there's all these different things that come together. And the one that we're concentrating now on is the option is that there are places where that stone has been overlooked because something in this universe has been pushing for us to be making concrete, making plastic, extracting unnecessarily from our planet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are big things you think about when you're working with just stones and rocks.
I know. But also too, it's harder. So the modular systems, it's very easy as a business owner to train people how to do that. I will say, when it comes to the concrete paver companies, they've done a tremendous job when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And something that we've evolved with is when we first started, I had in my mind this idea that my company would be much bigger than it is now. And through the years, I've really pulled back on that because I personally, and there's, to each his own, and I respect, people that are making a living in this industry, but I have realized about myself, I don't want that big outfit where I have to take on more of these modular systems. That's just not, that's not my brand. It's just not what I want for myself. So we're staying smaller in order to do more natural stone work, more specialty projects. And I think we've really started to assess even more so lately what we need to do to be as creative as we possibly can.
I think that's a really good segue into John talking about your work, because you have some of the most beautiful work that I think we've seen out there. And I mean, we're talking a lot about walls, but you don't just do walls, you do arches and you do sculptures and you do pine cones out of stone sculptures.
And these follies.
It's pretty wonderful.
Thank you. I should make it clear that it's not just me. I get to do things because I have students who are willing to go on great excursions with me into the realm of dry stone walling, and we will build something that I might not have been able to talk a client into as quickly. So there's some examples of things that I've done with my students, which I'm very pleased with, and are standing and are quite structural. But it's not just me; it's a group of people who build them. And in other cases, in California particularly, we've done some stuff that very talented people got together with me, and I most often would come up with the design, and then we'd build it together. So I guess, Frank Lloyd Wright, did he build his house? No, a lot of people built it for him. I have to get that clear a little bit.
Well, we'll talk about the process a little bit, though. So in terms of how, because clearly you're making a livelihood at this. So, I mean, I think. So
I think so. I should be retired by now, and I'm not. So maybe I have.
Well, listen, we never got into this industry to be, rich, right? Sure. We always say that. But talk about your process. Does a client come and approach you? They have an idea?
It's always different. The internet has been really helpful. In connecting with people who need stone walls, in educating people who didn't know about stone walls, the emails and texts, and then my work now is mostly word of mouth. There's often repeat business where people want more things on their property. There's all kinds of different ways of connecting with clients. The one way that I thought was going to perhaps get some work was there's a thing in Toronto called Canada Blooms, which is a garden show. And when we first were doing dry stone and trying to get the exposure out there, we would go every year and do something at Canada Blooms, but it didn't seem to be the way. It didn't seem to connect, and it didn't connect for me either, because those 4 or 5 days when you were making your exhibit or whatever you want to call it, it was like hell. There was machinery, there was noise, there was people dumping stuff, there was grinding and sawing and tamping and then putting plants in really fast. It was like warfare. And I thought, people, and yet, at 1 hour it just shuts down and they pump in some music and everyone's walking around and suddenly there's ladies in bathing suits walking around and you go, oh my God, if people could have seen what went on before. And I think I rejected that. I thought, is that the clientele I'm trying to get? People who would be easily fooled to think that that the garden that has been made there was so pretend. So there was something not real about it again. So my substitute was that we started doing festivals where dry stone walling was the main thing, and it was an honest building of something without lots of machinery, without all that extra stuff. We just it was a sort of a backing off of the trade show approach to, because the stone walls seem to be a different kettle of fish, I guess.
So you didn't have vendors at your festivals that were selling vacuums and blenders, John?
No,
Why?
no.
Oh,
We tried. We had one guy selling kilts, utility kilts.
Well, that's
that's-
acceptable.
yeah.
That's actually welcome. That fits
Yeah.
right in.
Well, we're laughing. We're laughing over here because we've done years of flower shows with, really, I think, spectacular stonework, and yeah, we stopped that.
Yeah,
We
it's
stopped as
an
well.
odd audience. You're right, because they all think you can do this in 3 days,
Oh, why are you
And-
charging me that much then?
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the vendors that came in, oh my goodness, I just didn't want to be associated with that whole scene. It's wild.
I
Just
think stone keeps us real. I mean, we can venture into maybe some aspect of technology and manufacturing, but you got to get back to stone. Even stone balancing is a way of just slowing down and saying, am I in tune with this stone? Even can I even balance it?
Interesting.
That I'm not a great balancer, but I was doing a little on the beach today, and I was thinking, it's a form of meditation. You have to really take a deep breath, slow breath, and tune into what stone is, because it's a pretty special substance.
For sure.
wow, the way you were talking, you just made me like sleepy and calm.
Beautiful.
I'm like, oh.
It's like a yoga class.
I know, right?
I was thinking about that though when you're talking about the
Meditation with
breathing
John.
and holding that stone. You're doing the vinyasa. You're doing the yoga flow right there, man.
Yeah, but it's not a technique. It's just, everything becomes a class, or you can write a book about it. But I think the self exploration, to just, like I was thinking, I was sitting there and thinking, why do we just give kids sandboxes? Why not fill them with stones too? Stones and sand, for people who can't get to a beach or can't find stone, there should be at a hardware store a bag of stones. Not too many, much bigger than this, but that they could, that kids could. And you mentioned this earlier, that you need to grow up with stone, I think.
Yeah, and
Well,
they love rocks and
I was
stones.
gonna say, you'll be happy to know, John, that in our sandbox we have stone, logs,
bet.
sand, pretty much drainage supplies. I think.
Yeah, so
whatever
we
they
have
can get their hands.
part of our
on.
property is where we keep our business. So there's piles of dirt,
Oh, that's
stone,
great.
everything, sand. They're happy as a clam. Creative too. It's
Yeah,
fun to watch.
So
I think a lot of us grew up with Lego, and that was good, because the first Legos particularly made you imagine what you were trying to do by clicking these things together. And so you'd create a very, it was a very primitive looking man or horse. And then later on, I think Lego dropped the ball, because they made the horses for you, and they made the little men, and And then the Legos were all specialized so that one Lego only did one job. And I think, again, kids are missing that because they really need to just be given a fairly repetitive material and then create from it rather than have a specialized, oh, this is an antenna to a Star Wars jet and it fits in here. And
yeah, I guess when you look at
So-
it that way, it's become pretty static. It's interesting.
yeah.
Interesting observation.
So, John, though, I'm not going to let you get off the hook talking about working with clients because, and the reason is because you've taken stonework and your stonework is really kind of at this very artistic level. I want people to understand that they can take their work to that kind of level and still kind of run a business out of it. So I would like to kind of get a better understanding. So a client comes to you, let's just play pretend, a client comes to you and they have an opportunity to build a bridge structure. I know you said,
bridge. Okay.
yeah, so I know you said that maybe you would
Yeah.
bring people in. So what happens? What happens?
Well, everyone's different. As I said, I had a client who said, I want a bridge. And I said, great. Why do you want a bridge? And he said, well, I saw the one you did down the street. And this was now the third bridge I was going to be doing based on two that had already been done. So there's a momentum of exposure to what I do. So I think that's one element. Another element is, well, ask me the question again, reword it again. I just
Well,
want
let me backtrack a little bit. So let's say you're going to take on this project. Do you at that time then reach out to students? Do you have other people who aren't students, that other professionals that you would bring in to help you build it? What's the process of building it? Do you have machinery?
Well, I don't have a process.
Okay, that's fair.
I often look back and think, well, I could maybe say that was a process, but it wasn't a process at the time. So the first bridge that I was involved in building was based on having seen one in Scotland, a pack horse bridge, which was built by a friend of mine, Norman Haddo, who is a Scottish diker. They're called dikers.
Yes.
Yep.
And he built this beautiful, beautiful bridge. It looked for all the world like it was 300, 400 years old. And yet it was only a couple years old. And he told me the story that it's a delightful story. And I had an epiphany there. And I stood on the bridge and I said to Norman, I said, why is there no bridges like this in North America that I know of? And I was pretty sure I was right about this. Now there are some, but there are not many in North America. I said, Norman, if I could arrange it, would you come to Canada? And if I could get some people together, would you teach us to build a bridge somewhere in Canada? And he said, why, sure, John, I'd love to, in his great Scottish accent. And I came home, and a year later, I found a client. I knocked on his door. It was a bed and breakfast in town here, and I knocked on the door, and David answered, and I didn't know him at all. And I said, what would you think if we built a bridge on your property? We would build it for you, and all you have to do is buy the stone. And I thought, it was a quiet for a moment. And then he said, it was a really interesting answer. He said, am I an idiot? And I still wasn't sure. He said, well, yeah, I would love a bridge. And that was the first one. And I then invited 10 people to pay $100 each to be part of this thing. That money went to flying Norman over to Canada, and we built this bridge for him on his property over a little creek in 1 week's time. It was it only took a week.
Wow.
And it was amazing. On Sunday, when we were building, the church bells in town were ringing. It was a quiet Sunday morning. It was Thanksgiving morning, actually, a Canadian Thanksgiving. And all you could hear was the hammering of chisels and church bells in this little valley where we were building this. And I thought, this is perfect. This is wonderful. And it was that bridge, when we finished it, that I got a phone call a couple weeks later from this lady who said, you built a bridge on my brother's property and it's beautiful and I would like one. So that was the next one. And so they sort of multiply. I think I've done 17 of them now
Oh, wow.
in Canada and the States, and each one has kind of a connection with a previous bridge. So they're bridging each other.
That's so cool.
Literally. So it really does sound like, I mean, you end up bringing a group of people together in one way or another to get these projects done, which is obviously a very unique way of working. But what an amazing...
We have a loose knit network of wallers here in Ontario, particularly. And if there's a project to be done that is bigger than your small crew you can call in other wallers and they'll come and help.
Cool.
And so that's a really nice thing. And it's a collaboration of people. In the same way as stones collaborate to become a wall, I feel like people are starting to fit together.
That's interesting. So what I take away from that story for our listeners is just ask. Always just ask. Because that's an amazing story about how you got your first, you did a cold call and you got it. It's amazing.
I think cold calls are great. Combined with, I mean, let's assume that you have a talent, that you have a skill to build walls properly. We've skipped that part in a sense. There could be some people who want customers and shouldn't have customers yet because they don't know how to build properly. So we'll jump past that to say that, let's say you're a good skilled waller. There's nothing wrong with doing a Photoshop picture of what can be done at somebody's house and do a cold call that way. Say, your house would be improved by, or your property would be improved by a wall, say, going around here, and show them photos or drawings of what it could look like. I think that's legitimate.
Interesting. Now, when you are working with these groups of people, something I'm really interested in is, you had a quote at one point that we read that said, "I'm an avid supporter of the idea of sharing knowledge freely from others," which I really love that quote. And just in that knowledge sharing, right? You're gathering that knowledge from others. You're putting that out into the world. In those group settings, what are some of the things that you benefit from? What are some of the things that you've learned from working with groups of people? Because I imagine that's a skill in and of itself to be able to, not only come up with these visions, but see them through with a group with all these different personalities.
I liken it to like an orchestra, that everybody comes with their skill and their violin or their cello they've been practicing. And they bring an element of the music to the whole composition. I like the fact that walling is not a one-man sport usually, or I don't think it needs to be for everybody a one-man sport. I think when you're working with someone else, you see how they do it, and first of all, you have to be teachable. You have to say to yourself, well, I've always done it this way, but am I wrong to think that he's doing it badly? And it makes you think about all the different ways that stone walls are built. And I think of it as, now I say it this way, they put a man on the moon, but they still haven't agreed about how a dry stone wall should be built. There's still legitimate disagreements about which way and how you should place the stones and how much harding and whether there should be through stones and what you do if you don't have them, and should you place them upright or should you course the stones. These are all things that you really come with your own ideas about and confidence that it works for you, but you also have to be open to go to somewhere and see people doing it differently and say, oh my God, I never thought of doing it that way, or I didn't think that would work, or how does that work? I went to Majorca and they build totally different than us. So it's a learning experience that I think you're talking about, and it's a give and take from other people who bring all kinds of knowledge with them. Even, amateurs might, and I don't even want to call them amateurs, but stone lovers and enthusiasts can come and do something and place stones in certain ways. And I think, well, before I tell this person that it's wrong, I should really analyze, is it wrong? Is it, and be teachable at the same time. I guess.
Well, do you think that's one of the reasons, kind of this idea of this orchestra and these musicians in a way coming together for one common goal? Is this sort of one of the reasons why you started the DSWAC, right? I got the acronym right. There's been some confusion about acronyms.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was just a pure love of stone. These other things are all sort of perks, and these are all bonuses. With you're basically following a very primitive. We all, I think, have a primitive love of stone, and it just needs to be unlocked.
Right. Yeah.
But then you realize what all these other cool benefits are of it, and one is, you know, the exercise and what we talked about, but it's meeting other people, it's working with other people, it's standing back and seeing what looks like. I mean, it's very easy to make something look new, but if you can make something that is convincingly looks old, that's a really happy experience.
Right. Well, and I love what you just said about we do have this innate love of stone because, you know, I've worked with clients who just live in a regular suburban setting, and you get a little bit of stonework in front of them and they can't stop touching it. They can't stop looking at it. And the touch, I think, is what's really important.
That's a big one. That's a big one. And I've sort of assumed that, but never consciously thought about the whole thing about touch. But I have a friend who said, no, he said, you build things that make people want to touch it. And that's all, maybe that's all you need to do is just build anything that gets people touching stone, because we don't touch stone very often. If you're not working with a substance, when was the last time most of the people you meet in the grocery store have touched us?
That's interesting.
Touched stone that day, you know? If I do a lecture, I take a stone with me and I put it in the first person's lap in the first row, and I say, hold the stone and pass it on to the next person. Because I said, I'm probably right in thinking you probably haven't hugged a stone today, you know, and they laugh. And I feel like it's just touching a stone or stones unlocks a little bit of what we're talking about here is unlocks a beginning fascination with, well, maybe we can do something with these stones. And that's the next step.
And I just think, just to go back to that touching, it's funny, we did that at a presentation too. We had little bags full of little stones that I handed out for that exact reason.
Good.
And I think when you think about it, again, it's just these millions and millions of years that we cannot even wrap our head around how long it's taken for this substance to form. And intrinsically, we're a part of that in some way because we're here. And so to be able to get your hands on that just immediately connects you to that whole cycle of life. I don't know, it's just wild.
It's not spooky. It's something else. It's magical. Magical isn't the right word.
It's grounding. It's like
it's grounding. Yes.
It's humbling.
And humbling. Yeah. There are so many words.
Who has the thesaurus? Let's go. Let's whip them out.
When I was growing up, I loved the thesaurus.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Wonderful book. And I was preparing to be questioned. and I knew about this podcast. I was driving along and I thought, you know, one thing I would like to get across, and it's the fact that as someone who works with stone, the way I do and you sometimes do is being a hunter-gatherer. It's an invitation to get back into becoming a hunter-gatherer. Instead of it being some buffalo or something, it is the stones that we hunt and we gather so much that we create a dry stone wall. And that is such a satisfying experience because most of us have moved on from the hunter-gatherer thing. Now, I know that there are hunters that go out and they do it because they love what they do. But I think that I and many of my friends who build walls have the most satisfaction of the whole experience of actually going and getting stones, even if it's to a quarry and loading them in the trailer or loading them somehow and getting them back to where you can gather them and make something with them, is a very fundamental, grounding, essential experience for a human to have.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
that's
But and as you're talking though, I am thinking to myself, it's all well and good, right, to talk about the process and being the person who builds it. But I think there's definitely two groups of people because
Hmm.
you people, you two, y'all you stone builders, y'all got a little bit of crazy in you. I always like to say.
That's called passion. Come on.
So I feel like you can be someone who really feels something from stone, like myself, who understands the power of it, but I do not have the personality to, or the patience, I should say, to
Patient,
patience to kind of take the time.
but you're a gardener. You're a gardener. You can plant something and wait 3 years for it to come.
But I'm
Or 5
totally
years.
impatient. I know,
Good
but
point.
no, I know. And that's the conversations we've had, right? I'm supposed to say that working with the earth and working with the plants has taught me to be patient and just let nature do. No, I'm super impatient.
Well, that's funny,
I
though.
just don't have a choice.
It's funny because when she properly places her plants in the new garden, John, and they're, in quart containers, I'm looking at it like, gosh, there's a lot of topsoil showing here. What are we doing? Can we put these together a little closer? Get
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
more immediate impact, but that's her whole level of restraint. That's her restraint. That's her issue when it comes to restraint.
Right. I that's actually interesting. I never thought of it that way. I have restraint, but I don't have patience. I want that end goal. I want to see that garden. It kills me that it's going to take 3 years, 4 years, 5 years.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
but I don't have a choice. So I
Yeah.
like and that's okay. That's just who I am.
It is okay.
But
It's perfectly okay. Now, listen, um, I have had to correct people who look at what I'm doing if I'm working in a public place or at a Highland Games or something. They say, "Oh, you must have a lot of patience," and I often used to say, "Yeah, I do," but then I thought, you know what? I don't either. I I'm a,
yay.
I'm similar. If I can build a wall in say 3 weeks that looks like it's been there for 100 years, I'm impatient, and
Good.
my
I'm glad to hear
impatience
it.
has produced a wall that looks 100 years old. So I, I'm a junkie for what is it? I'm totally impatient. Let's put it that way.
Oh my
So
gosh. Thank you, John. I feel
yeah,
vindicated. Like it's
yeah, it's very
okay.
true.
I think in
We
every podcast episode, we get a dose of therapy from all of our
Yeah.
listeners, and this is the
Oh,
the
it's
therapy
okay to
moment
be
of
me.
episode 12. Thank you,
good,
John.
good.
Oh, that's pretty
It's
funny.
it's good to get to know you people so publicly, uh, in such a public forum. But I suppose we should have connected long time before this. But I am very pleased that you took the initiative to do this at least.
Yes, well, I'm looking forward to the Rocktoberfest and these sorts of things that I told myself I was going to get to pre-COVID, and now I have a whole new outlook on life where I'm not going to miss these things going forward once they get started
Good for you.
again.
Good for you. It's
Um,
a good thing to tell yourself. I have a friend whose wife said to him, whatever that guy's doing, get connected to it because there's something going on there. And he told me this later, many years later, and I thought, well, that's a wonderful thing to say. And I don't know particularly where I'm going, but as I said, I look back and there seems to be a method that is working. And I just attribute it to following a passion, following the poetry of what you do and say, give it a chance, and beware of anybody who wants to put a label on it or manufacture it or put it out in a different way. Let it always be as honest as possible, because I think the final analysis is, if you can do it and it is the real thing, it's better than doing it and making it and trying to make it look like the real thing. For instance, if you're gardening, you wouldn't put a plastic rose bush in your garden. It would look like it, but it's not the real thing. And so if you can build a wall with real stones, then it is a real wall. But if you have to do it in some sort of lesser way, it's going to be lesser in of a therapy, or lesser for you to think about and feel proud of, I guess.
And what a metaphor for life. And I feel like especially the world that we live in right now, I think with the advent of social media in particular, we've sort of lost that ability to speak our truth in a way, in much of the way that you're talking about being authentic with the stone. The stone almost forces you to be authentic. And I've thought more than once about, stone and stonework and what a metaphor for life that is. You had a great blog, excuse me, the Precious Points of Contact blog.
Yes.
I imagine you wrote that around COVID time, right? Because I think it was in March, right? And just this way that we may start to connect with each other differently and having these 3 different points of contact, like when you do your balancing sculptures.
A tripod.
It was just great. It's just one more example of how this work that we do outside, how so much of it is a metaphor for the life that we live. So talk about the blog a little bit for you. Is that a little bit of therapy for yourself? Like how do you have time to do it?
Years ago, I watched Julia and Juliet, or it was about Julia Childs, the
There's a documentary, right?
the lady who wrote the cookbook.
Yep. Julia Child.
Yeah, and so there was a movie about it.
It's a great Saturday Night Live skit where she chops off her finger, but she had so much great energy, she chops her finger off, and there's blood spewing anywhere, and she's like, no. She doesn't lose her energy. She's just cooking, chopping things up. There's blood flying everywhere.
Okay.
But I digress.
What were you saying, John?
Let me say this. The blog was originated with that movie, because I realized that I had stuff I just wanted to say and put out there. And it was really the discipline of, it was like journaling. I didn't really need anybody to read it, but I needed to get out, why is this stuff so crazy good to work with? What is it about stone, and what is it about stone walls that makes me wake up every morning and go, what do I do? Oh yeah, I work with stone. Oh boy, why? And why am I so excited about that? So each day was an attack at, or another, coming in from another side of why it's so much fun and why it's so important to me, building with stone. And before I knew it, I had months of daily thoughts about it behind me, and so the initial sort of fear of how often can I do this? I mean, maybe I could write for a week and then I'd run out of things to say. I proved to myself that there was tons to say, and there was months to say, and I was doing it every day. For close to 9 years, I hardly skipped a day of writing about stone. And then I sort of let off a little bit, because I thought, well, maybe this is not, maybe that now it's gone the other way. I'm just too involved in the discipline of writing. But what happened, which really helped, was that a publisher picked up on it and said, would you consider doing a book about dry stone walling? Have you seen the book?
Well, I was going to ask you about the books that you have out. I definitely wanted to touch on that, so that's great that you brought that up. It
just happens to be here.
Just happens to be right next to you.
We'll get that up, because we'll definitely get that out on social media.
Yep.
Oh no.
But I bring it up because I could then just go back into my blog and cherry pick the essential stuff about, and not just a how-to book, but why to, and what's the thinking process, and what is what are the cool things about building with walls, about collaboration, about learning about yourself, about restraint, about exposure to other people's techniques. The whole thing fell into place. So my blog was something that, in a sense, I didn't realize was going to be so helpful to writing a book, and also to getting clients, of course, because sometimes they will read that and then contact me.
Nice.
But it's mostly a need to entertain. I now realize if I write something, it's partly to entertain people and get them thinking about rocks in a way that maybe they hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, excellent. And then so you have probably 3 or 4 books out from what I was.
Well, there's Apple Books. My lovely wife has these wonderful, self-published
Right.
books
Right.
that are,
Right.
they're a really good way to, and I think there's lots of different companies that will do this for you, but they will help you put out a book, which is far better than just let me show you a catalog of my photographs, or
Sure.
you bring out our photo album.
I really appreciate the way that you express yourself. You look like you're having a lot of fun in life, from what I've seen through your Instagram account, and just talking about how you're putting your product out there. So much of your product is you and your personality. So I really appreciate the levity that you're bringing to Instagram. It looks like you're having a lot of fun with it. So I just was curious about that.
That would be hard to miss, I think. However, some people do miss it. I've hired people and I've said to them, you can work with, we're going to be building walls, and you might be late for work, or you might not get it at first, or there may be any number of things that possibly could be annoying for your boss, but I'll tell you, the one thing that will get you fired is if you're not having fun. And,
That's awesome.
And I've had to fire people because, there are people paying me to learn how to build, and they're working alongside me, and they want to learn all they can. So it's a workshop situation. And then the next day, on Monday, I'm working with a guy who I'm paying to be there and doesn't even want to be there. He's waiting for coffee break. He's got a 15-minute coffee break at 10 o'clock. And I said, look, I can't do this, because you have to love what you do. And I will accommodate all the inconsistencies of you not knowing how to do it very well, but you better be in love with it. And that comes across. I imagine that I have fun doing what I do.
Absolutely. And anything in life, I mean, you can't take yourself, you can take your work seriously, but you can't take yourself too seriously. And I think that's what we've finally learned in our older age, is that it's okay to take your work seriously, but you got to loosen up.
And it's interesting, I think, in this world of design and creation,
a lot of people take themselves very seriously.
To kind of pull back from it. I mean, I feel like we all have to justify our work in a certain way, and maybe that's just a sign of maturity. I'm not quite sure. Maybe everyone's just different, and they have it right from the get-go.
I'm glad to see that you're people who can laugh at yourself, because that is very important.
For sure.
Well, I fall down all the time, so it's hard not to laugh at me.
She'll get up from the table and bang her knee and hobble
I fall
along.
off bikes. I walk into walls. I do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
I, for one, am ecstatic that you came on. I think the conversation was
awesome.
awesome.
Absolutely.
You're too kind.
No, your personality, this is what our audience likes: authentic, real content. So I'm
you've
very,
cultivated that, then you've cultivated yourself. So that's coming across. If I could say anything, I would say that Instagram is a pretty good way of connecting our ideas with other people, and you're doing a great job of doing that. I would like to explore more with Instagram, the kind of stuff I'm doing, but integrate it with words and poetry and things, which is kind of the direction I'm going, and hopefully we'll continue to do till I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, I don't see you retiring in any way.
No.
Maybe just transitioning at some point, but I get the sense you're going to keep creating on some level.
And then on Instagram, you are, and correct me, I did not write the tag down in front of me, at John Shaw-Rimmington.
No, Instagram is Dry Stone Waller.
Right, I knew that.
But it was very cool, because my daughter, who's very savvy, my older daughter, she said, "Dad, you ought to get it on Instagram." And I went on there, and they said, choose a name, and I just chose Dry Stone Waller, but it was early enough that no one had chosen.
I know,
that's a good one to have.
And then I felt the responsibility. Well, now I better be Dry Stone Waller. So my content it's not very much personal stuff. It's all, stones and stuff, which I kind of like. I don't have to be too personal. I can be what the name is, then I'm a dry stone waller. I like that expression, even though, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, I think they should have chosen a different name for it, because it's not dry. You often are working in the rain.
In the mud.
But we can find your blog. There's a link from your Instagram page to get to your blog, right?
Right.
And then what is the website for the DSWAC for anybody who wants to check that out?
It's just at dswac.ca.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. John, you're amazing. Your work is beautiful. What a fun conversation.
Yep. You're very much an inspiration, sir. I appreciate you.
I thank you very much, both of you, and please edit kindly. Edit the whole thing out if it's not any good.
No, not much editing.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please be sure to follow us at Landscapes and Pancakes _podcast on Instagram. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and comment where you listen to this podcast. And as always, check out our work and progress on magmadesigngroup.com and Magma Design Group on Instagram.